Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll get started in just a few seconds. We'll let you get situated and ready for our webinar today. A few more people joining. Oh, we're getting a nice group today for our webinar. This is great. And I recognize some of these names. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Oh, excellent. I'm seeing some names I haven't seen in a while. Hello. Hi there. So glad you can join us today. If you'd like to take a moment to go ahead and open up your chat and go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us where you're coming to us from. That would be great. Anything you'd like to tell us, go ahead. This is going to be a webinar, and so there's not going to be too much interaction outside of chat and the Q&A. So if you'd like to send us your intro there, that would be great. All right. We might be settling down a bit, so we'll get started in just a moment. Hello, hello. Excellent. As we're seeing some of those introductions roll in, I'll also mention too that we do have a Q&A section available in this webinar. So as Eric is going through his presentation today, if you've got specific questions that come to mind or something specific that you would like to have answered, please go ahead and use that Q&A for any questions. That will definitely help us keep track of the questions that are coming in and make sure you're getting answers to everything. Oh, welcome everybody. We've got a great crowd. We've got South Carolina, Chicago's joining us today, Missouri, Texas, excellent, Connecticut, Northern Illinois, hey, New York, awesome, and Maryland, cool. First time AP-CSP teacher, that's exciting. All right, welcome everybody. So go ahead and keep tossing those intros into chat and we're going to go ahead and get started so I can give Eric as much time as possible to go through his presentation today. So welcome again. Thank you so much for joining us for another one of the CodeHS spring webinars. And this one today is the preparing students for the CodeHS Create PT. And rather than having one of the CodeHS team members leading this time, we've got a CodeHS teacher trainer. We have Eric Magnus with us, and Eric is one of our fabulous CodeHS educators and teacher trainers. And he's going to be going through how he helps prepare his students for the CodeHS, for the Create PT. This is not the CodeHS Create Task. Couple of quick housekeeping things before we get started. If you could take just a moment to click the attendance link. If I could have somebody from the CodeHS team toss that into chat, that would be great. codehs.com/create-attend. By clicking that, what that is going to do is actually allow us to send you a certificate to say that, yes, I've attended this webinar. So make sure that you click that link. Linda just tossed that into chat. Also, if you'd like to take a look at the slides right now, you can either scan the QR code that's on Eric's slide, or you can browse to codehs.com/create-slides. And there's going to be a lot of links that are included in the slides, so you will want to hang on to these. I think we'll also include the slides in the follow-up email as well. All right. In addition to Eric, we have a few team members on to support, so we'll be answering your questions on the back end. We have Claire, we have Linda, we have Joy, and myself. We are all on to help answer those questions too. So let's go ahead, we'll get started. Eric, can you go ahead and click to the next slide for me? All right, one more sign up just in case you're joining us and you have not used CodeHS before, either as a student or as a teacher. Go ahead and create your free teacher account at codehs.com/signup. And it takes just a few seconds to get an account created. I am recognizing a ton of these names, so I think most of you have accounts, but just in case, you can go ahead and do that. All right. So without further ado, Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar this afternoon. I'm going to go over some kind of things I do in my class. And here's our little schedule for today. I'll give you a little about me and then tell you about the teaching approach I have in my classroom. And then we'll look at the AP CSP curriculum that CodeHS has created briefly. And then I want to dive from there into some supplemental materials provided by CodeHS that provide particular help for the AP performance task and for prepping that. And the one I'm going to select is called Testing 1, 2, 3. I'll talk about how I use that in my class, and then a little twist I add. Then at the end, I'll kind of show the aftermath of using that in my class and the next steps I use and some other things you can use to take away with for your students. And at the very end, we'll have a little Q&A time. So, and anytime you have a question, feel free to throw it in there. You have some real CodeHS experts with you today who know it all. So here we go. I've been teaching for 25 years. And in my preparation to being an AP computer science teacher, I was a classics major and I taught Latin for 20 years. And there was a point in time about 5 years ago that I had read the Aeneid 23 times and I had read the Gallic Wars 23 times. And I thought, I am done. I need something else to invigorate me in my teaching life. And I'm kind of at the halfway point, so let's go. And my the CS teacher at my school came to we were neighbors, and she came over to my room and said, I put in my resignation today, I'm retiring. And I immediately put together my resume and gave it to my principal, at which point she said to me, no. But eventually I convinced her, and I've been doing it ever since. And it's been great. I teach in Pennsylvania at Villa Maria Academy High School. It's a Catholic school. It's all girls. And as I said, I've been there for 23 years. And I've been an AP CSP teacher for 5 years and jumped in and have been grading AP CSP AP exams for the last 5, which is the most exhausting 8 days of my life every year. So, and then the boat there, just so I'm not all work, in my summer breaks, I love to paddle and repair and restore old kayaks and canoes. And there is the Penny, a 14.5-foot Mansfield that I restored, cherry wood, oak. Yeah, that's my little baby right there. So in my classroom, I really like to have my students be independent, self-guided learners. I do almost no lecturing. I start each class, I'm in a block schedule, and I start each class giving them the lay of the land, what's expected of them during that class, what's our expected behavior during that class, what's the digital formatting we're going to be using that day, and just reminding them where we are in a unit or a lesson or something like that. And then I let them go. And then my job at that point is just to kind of glide around the room. And as they need help, I will jump in. Usually when I jump in, it's the last thing that happens. If they don't know how to do something, I have introduced them at the very beginning to just-in-time learning. If they don't know how a while loop is working, or how can they add a color or change the size of the circle, I point them to the docs tab, or I point them to the lesson they just learned. Or I say, look, if that didn't say it to you, find Mr. Google. Let's see what's going on. You can do this. I also work with pair programming a lot, almost exclusively with the navigator and the pilot, and have them team up and so they can work together. Usually I shift pairings every unit. And then the last thing I do is I call it 68 seconds. When they raise their hand, they've gone through all their own learning. They've asked a neighbor, they've asked another neighbor, they can't find it out. They'll raise their hand. Can I come help them? And I say, yes, I will be there in just a moment. I acknowledge you. I'll be right there. And then I just wait, just ever so briefly, a minute, if that. And then I walk over, and it seems as if 90% of the time, by the time I walked over, I've given them just enough room after they've asked their question to then answer their own question. And I kind of call it my magic wand. I just walk over, and by the time I walk over, I wave my magic wand. They go, oh, no, never mind. I figured it out. I had an extra semicolon, and it's just done. And that's my approach to my classroom. With the CodeHS curriculum, I'm a huge fan of the curriculum. It saved me 5 years ago when I started as a CS teacher with no prior experience, and I knew how to code, but I wasn't prepared for teaching an AP class. And the retiring teacher said, check out this CodeHS, it will hold your hand. And boy, did it. And I was a free user the first year. I've been pro ever since then. And it really held my hand to the process. I had to teach CSA and CSP in the very first year. And I was just holding on by the fingertips and watching the videos, and it was really helpful. I really love how it aligns to the exam. The syllabus is fabulous, and you can look at that, and then it really parallels the pattern that the AP classroom has. For my students' sake, I love the organization, how I can name units and lessons, the logical progression of the material that's taught. For CSP in particular, I love the flow. I think the balance of the material where I do coding for a while, and there's this point where we're getting a little code exhaustion, and all of a sudden, we're breaking in and going into the internet for a while, or going into data, and the units kind of fall back and forth, and it's a good balance for my classroom. I really like that. My very favorite thing in all of CodeHS is the Docs tab. And I lead my students to that over and over again, particularly during the independence, the scary independence of the performance task, where my mouth is zipped and my hands are tied to giving them too much assistance. And I don't have to worry about that too much because I can keep leading them to the Docs tab. I'll show that to you in a second. The grading, I love the grading. As I said, I'm a pro user of CodeHS. I love the fast grade. I love the feedback I can give. My students really desire the green circle of happiness, and so they want to get that green circle, so that's really nice. The videos are really good. I think that the pacing of the videos are great. And at an all-girls school, I really like that so many of the voices on CodeHS are female voices. So these young ladies that I teach who are thinking about going into coding as a profession realize there's other women out there who know what they're talking about and they can lean on and learn from, and that's wonderful. Also, the clarity of the instructions. If they ever get stuck, they can go back and look again, and I can redirect them, especially during this performance task time, to go back and really look at what was laid out. My second favorite thing about CodeHS is the solutions. Probably should be my favorite. Because of the freedom of movement I give in a class, I give them deadlines for when a unit should be finished. And within that time period, whether it's a week or two or a day, I let them go at their own pace. They might finish very quickly or maybe slowly. It's okay as long as we're all finished by a certain date. And that puts a little burden on me because I might have 20 students in a classroom at 10 different locations in their coding. And so if they do ask a question, I can just say, so where are you? They'll say 443. And I can just take a quick glance and go, okay, this is the concept that we're trying to get through at this moment. And I look like a genius when I walk over to them. That covers the broad scope of CodeHS curriculum for CSP. In addition to this material, which covers the syllabus proper that's required by AP, CodeHS has a lot of supplemental material. And this is where I lean for preparation for the performance task. And when you go into your course for CodeHS CSP, if you click on the assignments tab on the left side of the screen, up pops all the assignments, and you can see you'll look at my screen right here with a few extra things I've already brought in that I use for my classes. But then at the bottom of the page, there's a search for content button. And when you click on that, this pops up with lots of extra material that can be assigned. And I know I'm there too. Wait, there's extra. I'm barely getting through what's already there. But for the purposes of the AP, I use much of this material. Some of the supplemental material is AP test prep, which I use a lot of. Coding extensions, if you have coding that's really fun or something new, like the web development, or the the helicopter game and the tic-tac-toe one. Those are really fun to jump onto if students want to do more that's beyond the basics in the lessons. You can also bring in playlists and borrow stuff from the problem bank. I am a huge fan of that. In fact, you can see I have the extra Carol puzzles and the Indiana Carol, which I have pulled in from problem banks. Indiana Carol is one of my little things I've made for my students. And it's also good for me for enrichment. I have students of a very broad ability level. I have freshmen through seniors. I have those who are taking it who have no prior knowledge and very little skill, to those who are gung-ho, already know some of the language, are ready to go to graduate school for this. And so with this broad arrangement, I'm able to use these supplemental materials to keep my faster moving students engaged. For the purposes of today, the supplement I use is testing 1, 2, 3. This is one of 2 practice performance tasks that are in this section. The other one you can see here is shopping lists. I'll get to that one a little later. Testing 1, 2, 3 is designed specifically to help the students learn. The 4th prompt on the create performance task requires you to describe 2 calls to procedure identified in the written response. Each call must pass a different argument that causes a different segment of code to execute. It actually, in addition to the 4th prompt, if you were looking at the rubric, this also can largely cover the 6th prompt of the rubric for grading the create task. And in the scaffolding process into the performance task, this is, well, we would have already done a lot of work discussing the rubric and using it in pieces with prior coding. But in my immediate run up to the performance task, this is my starting point. We scaffold right from here. I assign them the practice performing this testing 1, 2, 3, and I have them code this, and I point to rubric points 4 and 6. And it's really, really good. I mean, here are the instructions for the assignment, and I'll just state, they're just really, really good. Starting with the 2nd paragraph there. For this practice PT, you're going to prompt the user for a DNA string. After reading that string in, you will pass the string to a function to simulate testing for a parasite. Now, that sentence right there, in its ease of reading, can be a little complicated for the students. I guide them towards the docs tab. What are they saying to read in? What are they saying to pass a string into a function? If I make them pause and think about that and use the magical docs tab, they will get there. I do very little. They're really on their own for coding this one because I'm preparing for the performance task. Your function should take a string input. If the string contains the following, then the patient is infected, and you should print out that the patient is infected. If the combination is not present, then you report the patient is not infected. And then here's the output 1 and output 2, and it's very convenient because if the student says to me, is my code running correctly? Is this what you want? Something like that. I just say, run it. Does it match what they're asking? And if they say yes, I say, well, then you've answered your question. If they say no, again, I say, well, I guess you need to dig back in there a little bit more. And then here, this index of is very handy. This is a good little review for them to understand how strings are functioning and how they can use them in lists, which will be coming up in a moment. This, for me, the testing 1, 2, 3, I find takes about 40, 45 minutes for my students to complete. And at this point, here's the solution code that is given by CodeHS. And the student code will look largely like this. It'll probably be messier and longer, and here we have, for the purposes of the performance task, here we have the function being called. Here we have the parameter being put, the variable be put in. Here we have the procedure itself with its name, and here's the parameter. These are all specifically questions that are asked in the write-up for AP. And then here is our if-else statement that can have two different outputs depending upon our parameter. And I really like this code. It's extraordinarily short. It's easy for the students to read. And here it completes rows 4 and 6. It has selection, that's the if else. It has a parameter, that's row 4. It has our function, and it has our function call. At this point, this code is really good. The only thing it's missing with respect to the AP performance task is it's missing iteration, and it's missing a list, which are rows 2, 3, and 5 for the purposes of the rubric. And oh yeah, and so this is the first way I extend the assignment that was given by CodeHS. The first way I extend it is I tell my students, okay, copy your code, paste it, just make a copy of it, comment out half of it so you still have it there, and now add into your code a list and add iteration. Add yourself a for loop. And so here they add the list in the blue, and here they add their for loop to go through that list here in the green. A little caveat at the bottom here. This code is not actually functioning code. I took this from one of my students. It clearly has errors in it, but this, for demonstration purposes, shows here's the list that they would have put in, which of course, and then here's calling the function, here's our parameter, and then here is our iteration right here. And this code now, if written up correctly, will complete rows 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then the iteration is here, our for loop, and therefore we will have iteration, selection, and sequence all in this function. We have our function with our parameter, we have our function call, we have our list, and we have our list being used. And those are the key elements that AP is looking for in the performance task. After they finish this first extension, I extend this to a second day. Again, block scheduling, so 80-minute blocks. And I have them add a loop and a half. There are two reasons I have them add a loop and a half. One is I find that for whatever reason, my students struggle with this concept. And this is an easy, natural way to say, okay, go into the docs tab, find the instructions on while loops, put in a loop and a half. If you can't figure it out from the docs tab, go find the instructions for it. I think it's unit 4, and reread those instructions and do it. You've got to be able to put in a loop and a half, and I don't help them. They have to be able to figure this out. The other element I add here is adding a little user interface, where instead of the list being a static pre-built one, which is permissible for the performance task, I like to have them add the user interface, because that kind of helps them with the idea of what's the purpose of this? How is this interacting with humans? And so this is a very brief version of it, but I really want them to add lots of, hello, welcome to my program. It does X. We're trying to help you do Y. And as soon as you're ready, hit 1 and we'll get started. Enter the DNA strand, and to make it feel more like an organic program. And that really helps them when they're going to then understand this idea of purpose versus function when it comes to their performance task. So here it is. Here's testing 1, 2, 3. It starts with the if else, completing row 4s and 6. I add rows 2, 3, and 5 with just 2 basic additions, the list and the for loop. And then we just add this just to give a little bit more fill to the code they're going to be writing. After we're done testing 1, 2, 3, we are not actually done. We'll still have 60 minutes of a block left. I require them to do a full write-up for practice. It's an ungraded write-up. It is a checked, approved, and discussed, but I don't actually enter the grade. This is really just a practice for them. There's also a section in testing 1, 2, 3. I think it's called reflection. And I want them to fill it out. I want them to tell me what was hard, what was easy, what didn't they like about it. They usually tell me they didn't like that I couldn't help them, that they had to debug their stuff all on their own. And I say, yep, that's right. That's what it's going to be like. I then show them the scoring rubric for probably the 10th time. And I make them grade their write-up and their code, which of course has been scaffolded for them, according to the scoring rubric, so they can know what's going on. What I tell them, look, I'm the bad guy who's going to be scoring these for you, and you've got to convince me. And I also tell them, I'm really not that bright, so you've got to make it really easy for me to grade, because if it's too complicated, never mind. And in the write-up, I have a fake AP template. It looks just like what would come from the AP website when they're doing the official thing. I don't use any sentence starters. I don't use any prompts for them. I do tell them, just restate the question in the form of an answer. If you restate the question in the form of the answer, that's really friendly to the reader. They'll love you for it. And so they fill in an AP template. And then if they struggle with, like, how do I say this? What do they mean by this? What are they asking for? We will have gone over AP exam examples A, B, and C. We will have gone over the code and the write-up and the scoring for all 3 of those as a class, so they can have rehearsed what it is to look like this stuff. So the middle here in the blue boxes is some of the pitfalls that students often find themselves in when they've turned in their AP. Row 1, the row 1 in the rubric, which in the write-up I think is 3A asks to describe the purpose of the program and the function of the program. For the purpose, maybe I'll try with an example here. A purpose of a program may be a college wants to help students pack appropriately for their freshman year of college. And they're going to put out a list of all the things you need. And you just type in all the things you have, and it will tell you this is what you need to go buy. And so the purpose is to ease the move of freshmen into a college dorm. The function would be, there's a static list of items that need to be purchased. The user types in the items they already have, and the program says, this is what you are missing. So purpose is really going to talk about real world use of a program, where the function is going to be talking about the literal steps the function is that the program is using. Once I've used a couple examples of this, especially from CodeHS, which I'll show you in a second, and from the AP, they usually understand that there's a distinction between those two. Though I do hammer that home for them while they're in the performance task and they're doing their write-up. I will just walk around and say, is your purpose telling me a purpose? Like, I won't read it. I just make them, I say, look at it. And then they will have to vouch to me, yes, my purpose is expressing a purpose. Then row 3 asks the question for the rubric 3, but write-up 3B5 asks, why could the code not be written? And that's in the context of the list. And many students will say things like, my code could not have been written without the list XYZ. Done. And then they just move on. Well, it's just not true. And so they're just not going to get the score for that row. Now, there are rare cases where they are right and they can explain it well. But for the most part, the truth is the next part of the question, why could the code not be written, or how would it have to be written differently? I just tell my students, don't pretend like you wrote the most beautiful code of all time in 23 lines and no one else could do it differently. Of course they could do it differently. Just say, how would it be done differently? And that one they understand pretty quickly. Instead of a list of 20 items, you'd have to have 20 separate variables. Instead of one easy for loop iterating through it, you'd have to go through each variable and run the code each separate time. And they understand that. But it is very rare that a student is correct in saying it could not be written without this list. So I would lean on the different side. Row 4, which is right up 3C3, asks, how does this function affect the overall program? And the mistake here is often just one of blinders, where the students want to describe exactly what the function itself is doing, and they forget that it's sitting in a larger program. And they need to refer to the other variables going on the program, the other functions going on the program, the calls going on the program. They just need to explain, how does this sit with everything else going on around it, and how is it essential to all of those things going around? And what they often do is they say how it's essential, but they forget to talk about the other things around it. And that's very, very common. And then row 5 is the easiest to score for a reader and probably the hardest to write for the students. This is in the write-up 3CI, and it says to have a segment of code that includes sequencing. By the way, it says much more than this. I'm just picking the one portion that there's an issue with. Make sure that that portion of code has sequencing, selection, and iteration. And what we were told by AP when we're grading and we're doing, it's pretty arduous, is that means you need a for loop. I'm sorry, try again. You need a loop, you need an if else, then that covers your sequencing, selection, iteration. For row 5, you also got to have a parameter. For my students, I have them just use a for loop. The for loop really makes it so it's very natural that they're using the list in a very natural way. And so I direct them to using a for loop, though I don't have any control over that. If they choose not to use a for loop, they don't. But for all of our practices, testing 1, 2, 3, and shopping list, I require a for loop. In the red here, the AP-CSP Resource Hub is a great resource for teachers and students to understand how to prepare for the create task, the performance task. In particular, may I highlight sample A and sample B. Both of them have really good code. Both of them have very good videos. The main difference between them, and they are two different programs, is that sample A also has a stellar write-up and sample B has a not so stellar write-up. And I can tell you, I'm in the midst of my students doing their performance task right now. We have 3 in-class hours to go. About the 5-hour mark in, I had a student whose code was not working. It clearly wasn't fulfilling the AP requirement. She was frustrated. She was at tears. And I just told her, look, you just got to relax. We're just going to call it into the day. And then you're going to need to just reset and start over again. And so when she came to class the next day, I said, here's how you're going to start class today. I need you to go and read through sample A and sample B. And I gave her this link. Well, they all had the link. I just pushed it to them of this resource hub. Go read through that code. And you're going to explain to yourself why this code successfully fulfills the AP requirements. And she did it. And by the end of the class, she had her new idea. She was already moving with her new code. And I'm really happy to say, let's see, we're an hour and a half past that point in time. And she's got good code. She's got good code. And it's gonna fulfill the requirements. So I really, A and B are good places to lean, especially when, like I had with a student, I can't tell her what's wrong. I can't tell her the solution. I can't tell, all I can tell her is when she tells me it's not working, I can just say, yeah, you're right. This is not, it doesn't function, it doesn't fulfill the requirements. You got to start all over again. And instead, I can't reteach at that point. We're too far in, but I can say, go look here. Here's a model for you. And then what's next? After I'm done with that, I immediately move to the shopping list supplement, and basically we redo. The shopping list supplement doesn't need any extensions. It's pre-built, a full performance task. I have them, they're doing multiple choice questions throughout. Most of those at this point are from AP Classroom. Then after that, we do the performance task, and we're almost done the performance task in my class right now. And then at that point, it is just reviewing. We use the material from CodeHS to review. I give them hundreds and hundreds of multiple choice questions to go through. After their performance task is over, I make them grade themselves using the rubric again. And I will spend one entire day showing them terrible examples to say, look, don't do this and don't do this and don't do this. And every time I've got some kid who goes, oh, dang. And they go back and edit what they've been doing terribly the last 12 hours. And then we just wait for the big day. And there you go. So thanks very much for listening through. And I hope it's been a help as you guys get ready for your students and the AP test. So back over to you guys.
All right, thank you so much, Eric. And like Eric, I also taught AP Computer Science Principles before coming to CodeHS. My name is Linda, and I actually came from an English teacher background, so I can fully understand those of you that are coming in and going, I just got not only thrown computer science, but now an AP course as well. So we are just here happy to help in any way that we can. Definitely check out the AP CSP hub. That is hot off the presses. That's only been up for about a week. And we're still adding some additional components there. We're excited about that. Also, the College Board exam descriptions, and Lori's thrown a lot of links into the chat, but if you have the slides, you'll also have the links available to you. So, but what I wanted to talk through a little bit is about the performance task in regards to some of the rules pertaining to what we can share with students and what we should not be sharing with students as they work on this performance task. It's really hard to be hands-off because up until this point, we have been their source of debugging, we have been their source of instruction and coaching and encouragement. And although the encouragement can continue, there's some components that we're going to need to be aware of. So Eric, if you can go to the next slide. I'll take a look here. All right, so once your students, have started the official create performance task or just the AP performance task for this particular assignment, remember these are, again, from the College Board. If you look at the handout from AP Central, you'll notice that in particular, it says they can't seek assistance, whether that's in writing, revising, amending, or correcting work. So that includes any help with debugging their program, writing, designing the functionality, testing it, making revisions, and really even working collaboratively with a partner can be tricky. So make sure, again, that you're taking the time. I think the one thing that I used to do that was helpful as a teacher was I used to actually take a couple minutes of each class period and just continue to regularly review the rubric with my students. So, we recommend that you use the tools available to you. Also in AP Classroom, there is a quiz that pertains specifically to the Create Task rubric that would be great for you to be able to go through with your students. It has some question prompts in regards to those different rows that Eric just shared, and it's a great way to just kind of make sure that they understand what's being required of them before they hit submit. So once they submit the practice performance task or any work that's been revised or amended, once they've submitted to the College Board, teachers really can't give feedback or can't necessarily do anything with their submitted performance task aside from just seeing that it's in fact been checked off. The only time, of course, if they loaded the wrong assignment or there was an issue with plagiarism that you catch on your end, then you would want to, flag that or return the assignment if it was the wrong. I've had this happen before where my students put, maybe the exported PDF of their code in where the written responses were supposed to be and vice versa. And so I just had to, send it back to them and say, make sure that you're submitting the correct pieces and the correct prompts. So we want to make sure, as they revise their work, they're doing this completely on their own. Once it's submitted to the AP Digital Portfolio, there's a list of a couple of different checkboxes that they have to go through, just prompts that ensure that, this is in fact their own work. So we have some resources here for you. This includes the student user guide for APCS principals, some student handouts, and also the scoring guidelines. So I think that's in the chat for you. The scoring guidelines, we put in there the latest scoring guidelines that's been expanded with a little more information for your students. What I like about the new scoring guidelines is it makes it really, really clear. Before it said things like, oh, if there is a list that's trivial, it might not get the point. So now it's kind of expanding on what it means to have a trivial list. Maybe it's a list that's no more than two, maybe less than two different variables, and that might not be a necessary list for the particular for this particular code that the student is working on. So just a few resources for you. And we're so excited. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And if you have any additional questions, we're going to hang out here for a little bit, and we have some questions that we've answered in the chat, but if there are any more, please go ahead and navigate over to that Q&A box and let us know how we can be of assistance.
I want to jump in here. I just saw in one of the questions, and I want to echo what Joy has answered to the plagiarism piece. I really try to lay down a culture of not plagiarizing in my classroom. Admittedly, it starts the very first day of class, where I don't have the copy in front of me, but I have seen a copy of a teacher getting a letter saying that their students' scores have been thrown out because, it says it in about 300 words, but the short of it is because of plagiarism. And I say to them, I never want to get that letter. I said, I can't believe how embarrassing that must be. I never want to get that letter. To dissuade plagiarism throughout the year, I make them comment all of their code as soon as CodeHS introduces commenting. They find it burdensome, but it has reduced the cheating in my class, at least to this year, and to my ability to find to zero. To make them have to know what they're talking about and defend it, and they can't just steal it, because it's all the answers are on the internet, and so they can just copy and paste, but they have to explain it. It has just really stymied that. And so before I start the create task, once again, I tell them, don't be the group that embarrasses me. I do not want to get the letter because of you. And I hammer that down pretty hard on them.
All right. I think we had a question in the chat if we're going to be emailing out, a copy of everything. If you haven't already, the slides will also, I don't know, Lori, if we can throw that back out there just in case, but yeah, the slides have all of the links that we've embedded there for you as well. But we will also follow up with an email and make sure that, that you have the materials from tonight. So we're very happy that you're here. And Eric, we had a question in the chat as well. It says, I want to give students a grade on their performance task. I won't get a score from that until summer when school is out. Therefore, can I have them send the code video question answers to me as well, then grade it after May 2nd?
So I have not had them do that. Instead, I feel you there. It's a long time to go without a grade. And you get squirrely eyes from an administrator who says, wait, what, you haven't put a grade in for this quarter? And you're like, well, you don't understand. It's an AP thing. But what I do for them is I have my students journal the process of writing their code. And at the midpoint of each class and at the end of every class, I have this journaling template. It does two things for me. One is they have to tell me what have they completed in that portion of class, and what do they plan on completing next. So that's 18 times the way my school works out that they have to have done that for me. And they have to turn that in at the end of each block. So there's 9 separate times they turn that in to me. And that's a non-negotiable. Even if they're absent that day, they've got to write. If they just write in and say, I was absent that day, I did nothing. That's fine. But they have to do this journaling. The other thing it does for me is the journal also doubles kind of as a calendar of motivation, where I tell them you have these many days, and I've broken down, make sure that by day 7 you have functioning code, and that by day 8 you're making a video. It's kind of a procrastination prevention technique. And so I don't ever grade their code or their video or any of that ever. In fact, I truly don't actually even see it. I mean, of course, I see that they're working on it, but it's really kind of between them and the AP people. But I do have the journal thing. So that's the piece I do instead. I taught CodeHS a year long. I'm in an A-B block. So I would have started teaching them in the fall, in September. And I really like that. We did 4x4 a couple years ago. Administrative decision was make a 4x4, and that was tough. That was very tough. I prefer the A-B block.
What I used to do with my students is I actually took the sample or the practice performance task, and that's the one that they actually received the grade because it wouldn't be submitted to the college board. So that may be a place where you can really give feedback and definitely, reiterate all of the points in the create task rubric or the performance task rubric. It's a great way for you to run through it almost like treat it as if we're doing the real deal. And then as you reach that point that you're ready to have them go through the 12 hours that is necessary within class, you can still continue to point back to, all the feedback that you've given to them in that previous practice performance task. That's helpful. And Lori has put in the chat, we do have some upcoming workshops as well. There is another AP-CSP webinar coming on the 12th and another on April 7th. So really excited to host some additional teacher trainers. And we want, of course, to always hear from you, get your feedback. Oh, great question. So Eric Gregory asked, AP site says minimum of 12 hours. Can we do more than that?
Yes, you can definitely do more. It doesn't change the parameters for what you can and can't do. I tell my students that I'm going to give them, truthfully, I give them 12 and a half hours. Let me say this right, I schedule 12 and a half hours because the reality of being a high school teacher is there's going to be 15 minutes of fire drill at some point in there. So I schedule myself 12 and a half, and I'll get 12. And I do tell them, I say, if at the end of these 12 hours, because of family vacation or illness or whatever the reason may be, if you don't like your code, keep coding, keep working. I can't help you. I can't help you any more than I could have the last 12. But at this point, I'm moving on. And we're doing test prep. I would say in in almost every one of my situations, I will have students done with at least 2 hours to go or more for some of the strong students. And it is so difficult for me to have 20 students all done the task. And I still have 2 hours. And I got to say, look, I can't not give you these 2 more hours. But because if I don't give them to you and you do crappy on the test, then it's going to come back on me. So I say, look, now I'll give them other stuff to do. I say, if you're motivated, you want to prep for the test, there's other things you can do for prepping for the test and things like that. But I will not cut it short. So I do my 12 and a half hours faithfully, and then tell them if they want to keep going, they can, but I better see a check mark on my box on the due date. So yeah. And actually, I will say in my last day, I try to get everyone to have it all turned in on that last day. I try not to have any procrastinators. There's exceptions, but I try to do that.
All right, thank you again. So Lori put into the chat again, we do have some upcoming free PD sessions. So if you'd like to, codehs.com/free PD. And here on the next slide, where we have a survey. We always love to hear from you. We want to hear, feedback on this workshop and any future workshops that you'd like to see. And thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Have a great night.